Welcome everybody to the Stronger Marriage webinar. I'm Camilla Reese, and I'm so excited to introduce our special guest, Natasha Helfer. Natasha is a licensed marriage and family therapist and an certified sex therapist, speaker, writer, podcaster, and supervisor with over 20 years of experience treating individuals, couples, and family systems. She's an advocate for sexual health in marginalized populations and champions destigmatizing sexual lifestyle choices due to cultural, personal, and religious bias. Natasha's presentation today for us is called Bridging the Libido Divide. We'll be learning from her about the wide range of normal libido differences that couples can experience and how to understand, discuss, and manage libido differences in your own life with your partner. There will be an anonymous Q&A session with Natasha for the final 15 minutes of this 1-hour webinar. So please hold all your questions until the end and use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature. However, my chat line will be open throughout the webinar in the case that you have technical difficulties. Otherwise, please don't use the chat. All right, Natasha, the time is yours.
Okay, so let me go ahead and share my little PowerPoint that I have. And everybody hopefully will like my lovely picture that I found yesterday. I thought it was just darling. So welcome to Bridging the Libido Divide. I'm already like anxious because I'm like, what? I only have an hour to talk about such an important topic. And there's so many different directions I could go, but let's try to at least dive into a little bit of something. As far as just a little bit about myself, I do use she, her, hers pronoun. I'm white, I'm straight, I'm cisgender, I'm able-bodied and Latina. I always like to give a land acknowledgement, especially on this given week. And the land I currently present from is named for the Ute tribe. And you know a little bit about my education. And if you want to know more about me, you can always go to natashahelfer.com. And I always like to make some group agreements. And I guess the only way that you can agree with me is by turning off your computer because I can't shake your hand or get an informed consent. But today my presentation is primarily addressing couples who are married or in long-term monogamous relationships. That doesn't mean that if you are in a non-monogamous relationship or that if you're in a gay, lesbian, bi, trans, or gender non-binary relationship that there may not be information that's helpful, but most of my comments or research doesn't come from those populations. My presentation is not addressing couples where there are issues of domestic violence, and my presentation is not addressing sexual trauma. So I just want to be cognizant of that, especially since sexual trauma can be one of the reasons people struggle with low libido, painful sex, and other sexual issues. And then I always like to say that I'm a general expert in sexuality, but you are the expert of you. So please take what is useful and leave the rest behind. Make sure that you don't use my information in ways that are harmful to your relationship, meaning pressuring your partner or yourself to, I don't know, meet expectations or have arguments or anything of the sort. All right, anytime we're going to talk about libido, I want to start off with, ideas that you are not broken. It is absolutely normal for people to come in all shapes, sizes, and libidos or sexual desire. There's no right amount of sex that one should want to have or have naturally. A lot of people come in asking me what's the norm, or what types of sex should we be having, or how often should we be having sex? And that's not really even the right question. There's people who are having sex every day. There's people who are having sex once a month. There's people who are having sex a couple of times a week. There's people who are not really having sex hardly at all. So all of that is okay depending on what you want and what your partnership kind of wants. And there's no necessarily like healthy or unhealthy space in regards to all of that. It is common for people with both higher and lower libidos to be shamed and seen as either hypersexual or frigid. And it's no fun to be considered either by your partner. And in the past, we've actually pathologized some of these things. We've had diagnoses like nymphomaniac, or I don't know. There's just kind of been all kinds of things that have happened from a pathologizing perspective in regards to libido and desire. In regards to statistics, there's a very slight difference between men and women, with men showing slightly higher rates of thinking about sex, maybe having more sexual fantasies and initiating or seeking sexual experiences. This might be due to a higher level of testosterone. However, being in a heterosexual relationship where the man is the lower libido partner is not uncommon. And I can tell you that anecdotally in my practice, that shows up a lot. What is interesting about that, though, is that the messages that we get in our culture is that, men are always the high libido partner and women are never the high libido partner. And so men and women who fit into those situations usually come in with more shame in regards to those issues. Every relationship is going to have a desire discrepancy because you're different people. So you're not going to have the same libido as your partner. However, the distress usually increases with how large that discrepancy is. So if I want to have sex about 2 to 3 times a week, and my partner wants to have, sex maybe 5 to 6 times a week, that's not a huge discrepancy. But if my partner wants to have sex maybe once a month, and I want to have sex, once a day, that's a larger discrepancy, and we may have more distress about that. We may have more distress too, as far as our expectations around sexual encounters. So who initiates, the quality, what types of things we should be doing around sex, etc. And just so that you know, as far as in the sexological field, we might consider a marriage to be sexless if you're having sex less than 10 times a year. And sadly, sex is oftentimes considered to be penis and vagina sex, which is very heteronormative. And so we really need to kind of like break that open to mean a lot of different things in that. I think it's important to really, when we're talking about desire, to make sure that we're all understanding that desire is something different than arousal. So arousal is kind of physiology, what's happening with your body. So arousal are the physical signs that your body is preparing for something sexual to happen, which is usually something to do with hormonal changes, something that's having to do with blood flow changes, and something that's having to do with heart rate changes. Your eyes can change, your pupils can change, and lubrication can happen both in the vagina and also in the penis. Genital swelling, penises become erect, clitoral areas become erect, and females actually have as much erectile tissue as males. Whereas when we're talking about desire, we're usually talking about the wanting to want, the sexual drive, the horniness, the feeling in the mood, the fantasy, the more of the mental kind of the process of wanting. And those two don't always go hand in hand. So there are times sometimes when you are aroused that you're not necessarily wanting to have sex. And there are times when you're wanting to have sex that your body's not cooperating. So they don't always go hand in hand. And that is kind of a different topic for a different time, but just so that you understand that those are two different things. There are lots of things that can affect libido and desire, both lowering and, upping. So let's think about all these different things. So medical and hormonal reasons, prescriptions that you might be taking, maybe different treatments, like if you've gone through chemotherapy, if you've got diabetes or any type of heart issues, any type of mood disorder, clinical depression, anxieties, and of course, any prescription associated with them can affect your libido. lifestyle choices, right? Are you using certain substances? Caffeine? What's your sleep habits like? Are there nutrition? Excuse me. How much you exercise? Sometimes exercising too much or not enough. What's your stress management like? What is your weight management like? Eating disorders? How do you feel about your body image and your self-confidence? Lack of sexual education. Is the sex that you're having worth having? What's the orgasm gap in your relationship, for example? Sometimes fear of pregnancy, that can be both for a female or a male partner. Are you going through fertility treatments, childbirth, breastfeeding, child rearing? Where are you at in the child rearing phase? Are you getting enough sleep because of those kids? Is there any history of genital pain for either the female or the male partner? Are there any aging issues happening, perimenopause, menopause? A lot of, like cultural or religious or family messages that can affect how we feel about our sexuality, especially during our developmental years. Maybe we grew up with traditional gender roles, the purity movement with many Christian traditions, messages about what it means to be a woman, if you're, as far as your sexuality, or what it means to be a male. Sometimes if you belong to certain churches where there are disciplinary actions taken against you, etc. What's the status of your relationship? So are you in conflict? Are you having a hard time? For some people, that doesn't necessarily matter. Some people can be fighting or have a lot of conflict and still have great sex. For some people, that matters a lot. They don't feel very close emotionally, then they don't necessarily feel very close physically. Do you have unresolved sexual trauma in your history that is maybe interfering with your sexual drive? And also, there could be an issue in regards to your sexual orientation not matching your partnership. So maybe you're in a mixed orientation marriage. A lot of people, if they get married young, maybe didn't have a chance to explore their sexual orientation and got married heterosexually before they realized maybe I'm not heterosexual, or maybe they got married heterosexually due to religious and cultural pressures, or maybe they're asexual and didn't realize that, or maybe they're having some gender identity issues that were not allowed to be explored in their younger years. And this isn't necessarily a comprehensive list either, right? So these are just some of the things that can be affecting things. Really important if you're having libido issues to consider it a relational issue. A lot of times people come into my office and they come in as solo. And oftentimes with this idea that it's like, okay, this is my problem and I'm broken. And that's not a very fun way to come in talking about libido, whether it's I'm hypersexual and I want to have sex too much and I shouldn't want it. And my spouse is saying that, that I should be fixed, or I'm low libido and my partner is telling me that I need to, get more libido going and I need to be fixed. And so I like to say that libido differences are relational issues and should be treated as such. And both partners should be willing to do their own work and consider how they're contributing to the patterns that are causing the problems. So this isn't about one person getting fixed. And we want to build empathy for each other's positions. And even if some of those issues that I just talked about on the other slide are affecting one of you, they're still going to be affecting both of you. How you talk about them, how you negotiate about them, how you eventually come up with solutions, or how you're going to address them. And I think you want to hopefully stop doing some things relationally going forward. So if there is any painful sex happening, especially intercourse, we really want to stop that, especially because there's so many ways to have sex that you don't need to have intercourse for. So many women in particular feel like painful sex is something that's normal, that should be expected and should be pushed through. And vaginas are just not a big fan of that. And they'll anticipate painful sex in the future, which increases anxiety, which makes painful sex more likely in the future as well. So we really want to stop having painful sex and find other ways to enjoy each other's company while we resolve any type of genital pain issues. We also want to stop having obligatory or duty sex. Just because we're married doesn't mean that we owe each other sex. Hopefully, we want to share sexual experiences and do so in a way that is mutually pleasurable and that is mutually consensual and that both partners are excited and desirable about. So if you're in a space where you're offering sex from a duty or obligatory space, that's going to wane your desire. And again, your mental and physical status is not going to be on board. So you're really not you're not fostering an environment of desire that's going to help your long-term relationship. We don't necessarily want to fake orgasm, and both men and women fake orgasm, believe it or not, as a way to help their partners maybe feel better, to avoid conflict, to not address issues, to get things over with quicker. But in a way, you're training your partner incorrectly as to what makes you feel good. So it's better to just say, you know what, maybe we're not going to have an orgasm tonight, but this was nice. Let's just kind of move on to the next time, instead of faking something that isn't really happening. And we definitely want to stop any type of coercion or guilting or power plays, pouting, silent treatments when there's rejections between us, because that kind of stuff really ups the anxiety in our relationship instead of finding workable solutions. So we want to build resilience for healthy conversations. We want to have hard conversations. These are hard conversations. We want to build emotionally mature conversations, because I think for a lot of us, our sexual egos are somewhat fragile. And they're fragile because we haven't really been taught how to have these conversations very well. Our overall systems have somewhat failed us. It's not like we've had a lot of people teach us how to have these conversations. So we can blame the systems around us, right? We don't have to always blame each other and be so mad and upset with each other. It can be helpful to blame the overall systems, our school systems, our church systems, our family systems. Nobody taught you how to do this. So, give each other a break, give yourselves a break, and let's try to, start from a place of grace with one another. We really want to start thinking about giving each other, getting rid of meaning ruts. And what I mean by that is it's very normal to want to make meaning out of your stories. But when we come up with meanings, sometimes they are false and not helpful. And some very typical meanings that I see in libido stories is that it's very personal. So I would encourage you not to make the stories so personal. So for example, I must not be attractive or sexy enough. And usually sexual drive or libido has very little to do with being attracted to your partner. Being attracted to a partner is important, but that attraction usually does not correlate with frequency of wanting to be sexual. Another meaning rut that's very common is you don't love me, or all you want me for is sex. And these are not helpful paradigms. Many people enjoy wanting and other types of intimacies that are not sexual. And many people feel very emotionally connected through sexual connection. So again, these are meaning ruts that your partner's probably not coming from, but you're imposing upon your partner, and they're not helpful, and they're causing divides between you instead of togetherness. Initiation meaning ruts are usually very painful. Typically, the higher libido partner in the beginning of a relationship is the person who initiates the most. And that's because they're experiencing spontaneous desire more often than the lower libido partner. And that's nobody's fault, right? That's just something that's happening naturally. But because of these meaning ruts, eventually the higher libido partner maybe gets tired of initiating, and they feel very hurt and rejected. And then they may stop initiating. And they don't necessarily see that if and when the lower libido partner leans into that responsive desire, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, that's actually very meaningful. Because if you're not really in the mood for something, but a person says, hey, are you willing to do this? And the lower libido partner says, actually, I think maybe I am, or I'm willing to try, and they lean into that and it goes well, that's huge. And so we don't have to necessarily be thinking that that's, not a great thing. So I would, just encourage high libido partners to reconsider that idea of no longer initiating if you've gotten that far. But again, these are things that I want you to be talking about. And then, of course, the meaning ruts that maybe there's something wrong with me. So that self-blame meaning rut is damaging to your self-identity and your sexuality. So I'd like to talk really fast about the yins and yangs of desire, because I find like there's so many paradoxes in these issues around sexuality that it's almost comical if it wasn't sometimes so tragic. Spontaneous versus responsive, right? So in some ways, desire can be very spontaneous, very quick, very easy for some people. And for some people, it's very responsive. So it's very contextual. It's very much like, I'm responding to something that's happening first. These are two models. One is linear, that kind of just is very quick, and one is more like contextual, like a story. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this other than maybe encouraging you to especially Google Bassan's circular model of desire, because Bassan said she had an interesting theory that even spontaneous desire is responsive, because you're responding to something, you're just responding to it quicker. So it's that everybody's responding to a story of some sort, even if it's quick response. So the idea that all desire is contextual to something, but some people are quick and some people are slower to that. And that's not anybody's fault. And let's stop blaming each other for that. And let's just use each other's strengths and be empathic to each other's differences in that regard. And when you think about responsive desire, I want you to think about that it's not that you're not experiencing desire or that you are broken. It's more about you're responding to a relationship, or you're responding to an invitation, or you're responding to pleasure. And by the way, we're not very good about having a relationship with pleasure in our culture. So that's another thing I'd want you to think about. Or you're responding to relaxation. Responsive sexual desires when desire shows up in response to stimulation, meaning something sexy is happening and the body is responding to that. From the work of Emily Nagoski, which that's a great book to get if you haven't, Come As You Are, 75% of men are experiencing spontaneous desire, as well as 15% of women, according to her research. But again, like Bassan was saying, her argument is that all desire is responsive or contextual, including men. So most people, regardless of gender, fall within a blend of this. And so we can use this idea to really dive into what's going to work for us. What do you respond well to? What can we do to help us have a better effectiveness at making these things happen? Because what the typical model is, it's 10:30 at night or 11 o'clock at night. We've been working all day. The kids have had 500 things that we've had to do for them. We're exhausted. We have 500 things to do tomorrow. And, if you're hoping for like, a 10-minute romp with 2 minutes of foreplay, yeah, there's not a lot of desire for that, right? And I'm probably not going to have an orgasm in the next 15 minutes, right? And so how are we setting up the environment for my desire to be cultivated? And I love Emily Nagoski's kind of metaphors of gardening and making sure that we're cultivating spaces where desire can flourish. Now, another yin and yang is that physical relaxation is important for desire. right? So we want to be relaxed. Anxiety is not helpful for orgasm or surrender or for desire. So the importance of becoming uninhibited, setting the stage for relaxation, being mindful, breathing, maybe physical massage or touch. Sometimes substances can help, having a glass of wine if that falls within your value system, or um, wherever it's legal for you. Some people find marijuana helpful. If you have an anxiety disorder, maybe taking your anxiety medications at times when it's going to be correlated with your sexual time. ADHD medications as well, because if you have ADHD, it's hard for you to focus. And so timing that at a time when your meds are still in play, all of those things are things that you can be thinking about in regards to your desire being at play. How am I being in a space where I am in a space of relaxation, right? So the yang to physical relaxation and desire is that I also need physical stimulation. Stimulation is important, right? So am I moving my body? Am I having sex toys or other stimuli that really gets the vibration and the texture and the rhythm that my genitals and my erogenous zones need in order to be stimulated sufficiently to get my arousal going sufficiently? So what kinds of textures do I enjoy? What kinds of aromas or visual stimuli or auditory stimuli? Do you enjoy certain types of music, or and auditory, do I enjoy listening to certain types of stories or certain types of words that you're telling me, right? Or all those kinds of things that help me stay in the moment, because otherwise sometimes our brains can go elsewhere, right? If we're not stimulated enough. So arousal level is important in knowing what you will enjoy. Usually the higher level of arousal, the more stimulation you seek or will tolerate. So for example, if 10 is an orgasm and 1 is very, not hardly aroused at all, let's take nipples, for example, as an erogenous zone. Well, you might want your nipples stimulated at a much higher level at a 7 than you would want at a 3, right? And so, but if your partner doesn't know that, then, how's your partner supposed to know what is pleasurable and what would help you get to that space of orgasmic potential? So those are all the kinds of things that will help your desire be more present. All right, so another yin and yang of desire is that your brain is your biggest sex organ, right? So the importance of mental stimulation, while at the same time, your brain is your biggest interrupter of desire. So, because, general anxiety, or if you've got a mental health disorder, or if you've got unnecessary guilt or shame, all of those things can be interrupting you during these times when you're trying to connect. Performance anxiety is a huge interrupter of sexual activity. You're worried about how you look, or whether or not you're performing in the right way, or does my partner like what I'm doing, or excuse me, am I doing this particular activity correct? Maybe you're thinking about what just happened in your job today, or something that stressed you out about your kids, or you're having a trauma interruption, right? Unfortunately, sometimes right in the middle of a pleasurable event, you're having a kind of a soft or even a hard flashback. So these are really frustrating things that can happen during a sexual encounter. And a lot of times what can be helpful in helping you get back to a space of desire is either a mindfulness practice and or a distraction. So stimulating yourself away from that, or a mindfulness practice. So so mental relaxation is important, and these are some suggestions that you can look through these. And by the way, if you want to screenshot any of these slides, you're more than welcome to do that. Just, give me credit for anything that you might share with anybody. But these are all kind of mental relaxation ideas. The yang to mental relaxation, of course, is mental stimulation. So mental stimulation is just as important as relaxation. And this is where using your imagination is very important. So fantasy, and fantasy can be individual or partnered. And this is where people a lot of times feel very guilty about what they're thinking about. Like if I'm thinking about something that either I'm not communicating to my partner about or isn't about my partner, that somehow I'm doing something wrong or I'm being unfaithful or something along those lines. And if you have some type of values in regards to your religious practices, that may be in conflict. At the same time, I want everybody to just know that it is very common to have fantasies that are not necessarily about your spouse during sexual encounters. So Justin Lehmiller just did a very important research project in the last few years where it showed that 84 to 90% of people have fantasies during sexual encounters. And there were 5 very common themes. So, and these were the kind of common themes. So like more than 2 people in the sexual space, power plays, meaning like dominant, submissive types of themes. Something taboo was happening in the sexual space. Something romantic or intimate was happening in the sexual space. Something was happening as far as a non-monogamous relationship, or something gender bending or homoerotic. So those were the most common 5 fantasies that people were thinking about during sexual play. And most people stay in fantasy lane. So it's not this idea that because you think about something, that means that you're going to go out and do something. So this is something that actually can help stimulate desire quite a bit. And it doesn't have to be something that goes against your values, because again, romance is part of one of those fantasies. So it can include your partner. It can include something fairly just, like pretending that you're on the beach or on vacation or doing something that you don't normally get to do. Erotic talking can be something that can be very stimulating. A lot of times I ask couples if they're talking to each other or even giving each other any type of clue that they're into the sex that they're having. And it's oftentimes very common that people are telling me that sex is quiet. And so they're not really communicating. But even if you're not necessarily talking, just sighing and moaning is enough stimulation to let your brain know that something enjoyable is happening, and that can up your desire. And again, using materials that can help stimulate your brain, whether that's something erotic, it can be literature, pornography, music, poetry, art, whatever again falls within your value system as a couple. So some strategies other than what I've already mentioned as far as where you can go from here. Where is my, okay, there we go. Like, why are my bullet points not coming up? Are we defining sex broadly, right? So again, sex isn't just a penis going into a vagina. There are lots of ways to have sex. We can manually stimulate each other. We can spoon each other while one of us stimulates ourselves. We can use a sex toy. We can rub up against each other. We can have oral sex. There are lots of ways that we can enjoy each other sexually without necessarily one of us having to do something that we don't have desire to do, and still be present for one another. This idea of scheduling sex, for some couples, this can be very helpful, not for all. For some couples, this can increase anxiety, but for other couples, this can anticipate pleasure and desire. It can be a fun way to like create almost like a date. If you think about back when you dated, you would call each other up and you'd say, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you Friday. You'd get kind of like this excitement going, and it would just be a fun time to look forward to, and you can anticipate a good time, and you would make the time and space for the type of experience that you would want to have. Um, can we focus on other types of intimacy? So maybe for one of you, sexual intimacy is really important. Are we making sure that the other intimacies that maybe the other partner thinks are important are also being prioritized in the relationship? And how is your non-sexual physical intimacy going? Because if sometimes in couples where libido issues have gone awry, it's almost like we don't touch each other at all or snuggle at all, because one of us maybe is afraid that if I give any type of physical any type of physical affection, you're going to think I want to have sex. So can we start maybe having experiences together where we know we're not going to have sex or become sexual, but we can still enjoy skin to skin contact or cuddling or hugging or other types of physical affection that we used to enjoy or still enjoy? Is there room for solo sex in our relationship? So a lot of times this is a great way to bridge that divide, where it's, if we can't have sex together because one of us isn't in the mood, that's fine. I can go and masturbate and take care of my own needs, and that there doesn't need to be this big friction between us. Again, for some couples from some religious backgrounds, that may be something that is not within their values, but I can tell you that I've worked with many Mormon couples, Catholic couples, and other conservative religious couples where they do find space for this kind of flexibility, because in the end, it helps them have a better marriage. And so they choose a more like spirit of the law versus letter of the law type of approach to how they think about these issues, because they don't want to put so much pressure on one person for these issues in ways that would really kind of damage their relationship in that perspective. If there is a history of really toxic issues, like coercion, sometimes there can be spaces where one spouse comes in and tells me, I really think that there was some non-consensual times when I feel like, we maybe even crossed the line into marital rape or something really problematic. I sometimes can recommend a sex sabbatical for a period of time. I would also recommend at this point maybe seeing a sex therapist. Sometimes it can be helpful to take a sex break and go back to kind of more of a dating forum, so that you can see, if you're wanting to salvage the relationship, see if you can step away from the dynamics where you're currently really stuck, and see if if you can start fresh from a different foundation. So look at the list of the potential issues maybe that I started off with. Have a discussion about which factors you think may be contributing to your problems. Come up with maybe a plan or some ideas. Does that plan include a visit to a urologist, a urogynecologist, an endocrinologist, or other physician, or a pelvic floor therapist? Especially if there's any genital pain issues or hormonal issues that you're concerned about for either of you. Does that plan include seeing a marriage or sex therapist, especially somebody who is trained in sexuality, because not all marriage therapists are trained in sex issues. So be careful who you go to see. And yeah, those are kind of the suggestions I have for you today. Which is, a lot for libido issues. I do want to share at the end, there is no shame in deciding that you are sexually incompatible as a couple. I think sometimes our culture poo-poos this idea that, the sex isn't important enough to get a divorce or to separate from. Actually, sexuality is a very important part of your identity and who you are. both whether you're asexual or hypersexual or somewhere in between. And so if this is enough of an issue and you're incompatible, that can be a very painful decision and very difficult decision. But it is a legitimate enough reason to decide that you may be, better off within a different partnership. So I hope that if that's where you're at, you would get a lot of help deciding that that's where you're at, and also doing that in a mindful way so that you can do so amicably and family centric, especially if you have children. So I'm very marriage friendly and try to really help couples, you know, lean in towards marriages as much as possible, and at the same time understand when that isn't feasible, that there are ways that we can part ways in ways that are friendly to the family system. Okay, that is what I have for you today. Camilla?
Hi, so we can go ahead and move into our Q&A portion
Okay.
of the webinar. So if you have questions, go ahead and use that Q&A function. And if you want your question to be anonymous, make sure to indicate that. Otherwise, your name will be on the question. And Natasha will answer as many as she can for the next 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, and then I look at those, right? Is that what you're saying? I look at the Q&A. Yep, I see.
Yes.
Okay, but there's no open questions. All right.
Yes. Okay.
I'm shocked that I got done in 45 minutes. I was like, it's interesting as I talk about libido issues because I'm thinking of so many of my clients and people, and because it's so context driven. There's so many different stories and so many different situations, and yeah, the pain is real on both sides of the table for so many. So I hope that I did a job where people understand that it's hard on both sides of this equation. So either I did a really good job and nobody has any questions, or everybody left. It might also be a hard topic to ask questions about. All right, so here's a question. How do you communicate to a partner that there is nothing wrong with them or you when they think there is something wrong? Yes, I'm wondering if the partner is thinking there's something wrong with themselves or with you. But either way, yes, if a partner, if a partner's coming at you um, in regards to, kind of attacking you, that's difficult. It's difficult not to get defensive. And it's, excuse me, I think this is kind of where just some communication strategies can be helpful to kind of maybe sandwich approach the issue. And what I mean by that is, try to start off with a soft approach and end with a soft approach, but put the difficult stuff in the middle. Like, I really love you and I want to have a healthy sex life with you, or I want to be successful in our communication about this topic. Um, and I try to use ands instead of buts because buts would qualify things. And I I feel attacked or it's hurtful. It's good to use feelings language, right? So I feel attacked, right? It's hurtful, or it's frustrating when this is kind of posited in a way where it seems like it's all my responsibility. So it would be helpful for me if we could talk about this in a way where it was more partnered, where we could talk about it more back and forth. Because I have some ideas about, things that would be useful to me. I would like to listen to some ideas about what would be useful to you. And then end with that softening things too, because I love you. I want this to be better too. Um, I want to have better sex as well. If those are things that are true, right? So that's one way that you can do it. Another thing that I think is really helpful for couples to do is, and I have this on my downloads page in the on my natashahelfer.com website. If you go to the downloads page, I have a sexual values exercise. That's a helpful thing to just do together, just download it, go through it maybe individually first. It's an exercise that has you think about, when I think about my sexuality, what do I value? What do I think is important when it comes to my sexuality? And the way it goes is you circle a lot of words, but it has you kind of come down to 5 main things that you value. And then come together as a couple and kind of compare what words you came up with and see where you are similar and maybe where you differ. And where you're similar, you can, see those things that are important. And where you're similar, you can, just celebrate that. Where you're differ, you can see, okay, well, maybe these are some spaces where we can lean into each other and influence each other and actually be better off as a couple because we actually can expand how we are together. So that would be maybe a helpful thing to think about. If your partner is communicating that there's something wrong with themselves, like self-deprecating, like there's something wrong with me, you can always also encourage your partner to seek some individual therapy too to help their own maybe what do I want to say, like their own self-esteem, their own self-worth, things of that nature. Okay, let's see, there's 2 questions here. So there's a question that says, how do you deal with cultural or Christian issues that have suppressed the sexual union between long-term partners? We may not even be aware of the root cause, but it is affecting our sexual relationship. How do you deal with cultural Christian issues that have tainted or suppressed the sexual union between long-term partners? And we may not even be aware of the root cause, but it is affecting our sexual relationship. Okay. Yeah, so there are a lot of cultural issues that do, kind of that have messages. I mean, a lot of cultural Christian issues that have to do with purity culture can impede how we feel about ourselves sexually. It's kind of almost a whole different presentation that I could spend a whole hour on in of itself. But maybe you could, as a couple, look into that and see if your partner would be willing to see if some of those messages are things that they feel like have impacted them or not, and see if those are messages that you feel have, sometimes just having a conversation about what you feel some of those messages could have been just opens up some permission or some ability to have a conversation that could open up some energy between the two of you. And if you do both agree that those messages have impeded your sexuality as a couple, then what would you want to do about it? Like what kinds of things would you want to give each other permission to do now? Um, what kinds of things, like for example, I know I've worked with a lot of Mormon couples, for example, that um, at one point maybe didn't feel like oral sex was something that was okay, or sex toys weren't okay, but then got to a point where they did feel like those things were okay and their sex life was very much benefited by those things. Um, and that was a great gift and actually increased the desire for sexuality in their relationship. So, they recognize that that was something that was cultural in their history. They went through a period of exploring and seeing if that was going to be helpful for them. And now they're benefiting from the fruits of that in their marriage now. So it does take that willingness to, have a conversation, to invite a possible exploration period and see if something different could be helpful to the couple or not. Another question. I have the lower libido drive in my marriage. I often end feeling mad or disappointed in the experience, even if I enjoyed part of the intimacy or reached orgasm. This causes me to be hesitant the next time. What do you suggest to do?
Natasha, really quick, could you click answer live when you answer so everyone
Oh,
can read the question?
yes, sorry.
Nope,
Okay,
no worries at all.
sorry. Okay. I'm not super techy on this. All right. Well, I guess I would be wondering why you're feeling mad or disappointed, right? I'd want to know more about what you believe those feelings are about, because it does sound like there is some level of pleasure there, and even orgasmic pleasure. And so you're correct that you're having some negative feelings and yet some positive feelings. So you're having some yin and yang of your own, right? as to some hesitation, some pleasure, some hesitation. What's that about? And so your system is probably confused. Do I like this? Do I not like this? So I'm wondering what you're feeling mad or disappointed about. Are is it that things aren't going the way you want? Are you not asking for what you want in the experience? Is it not happening in a way that you're hoping it would have gone? Are you not advocating for yourself? Um, and are you not the driver of the experience? And so those are kind of the things that I'd suggest for you to be thinking about, is what's driving those particular feelings, especially since it sounds like you do have the capacity for pleasure. But what's interfering with the pleasure? And are there solutions for those interferers? And are you able to communicate with your partner about those interferers in ways that you can um, maybe make those less likely the next time? So that's a question that I guess I would want a lot more information about. Yes. And let's see this next one. How do you balance your sex life in a marriage when your partner has a higher libido than you do? Is there a common solution for most couples to help balance that? How can we balance that with no conflict and leaving both couples satisfied? Yeah, so I think that this is where it depends, it depends on the couple. Some people, oftentimes I usually talk about compromises where both people are kind of equally uncomfortable. But we also don't want to be super uncomfortable, I guess, in regards to our sex life, right? So the lower libido partner doesn't want to feel like the person that's causing the higher libido person's sex life to feel hostage. The higher libido partner doesn't want to feel like they're pressuring their lower libido partner to do things they don't want to be doing. So we want to figure out ways that you're compromising where it's not devoid of pleasure. Okay, it's not devoid of pleasure. So, and that's what I mean by figuring out ways to have sex or be sexual where either the partner is having solo sexual experiences where you're not involved, or you're involved in a way that is still pleasurable for you, even if you're not necessarily having a certain type of sex, um, like just being present, massaging your partner while they manually stimulate themselves, or maybe have some type of sexual encounter, but that doesn't involve intercourse if that's not what you're in the mood for, or making sure that the experience includes whatever type of pleasure that would involve you having the type of responsive desire that you would need to have that drive facilitated for you. So is there enough, romance, fantasy, stimulation, whatever that is for you to get to that space where you do develop the desire that you need? So those are all the different kinds of things that you can be thinking about to compromise that. And are you creating the space and the time for those types of events to happen? And that's going to look very different for each couple. And why, if this is causing you, for a lot of couples, this isn't that hard to negotiate. They kind of negotiate it over time. But for some couples, it's very difficult to negotiate. And it's kind of coming up as a constant chronic toxic issue. And that's where I would recommend seeing a sex therapist who can help you come up with those solutions in ways that isn't putting your marriage at risk. Those are great questions. Oh, here's another one. Is it true that, answer a lot. Is it true that every husband would like to have sex with another woman other than his wife? Not necessarily that he would, but that every man wants to. This is something my husband has told me, and I have a hard time believing it. Yeah, I don't know that there's truth in anything being an absolute ever. And I just said an absolute. So I think it is very common. It's very common for people to have fantasies that don't include their spouses. But again, fantasy and reality are two very different things, right? So just because you have fantasies about other people doesn't mean that in reality you would do those things. And that's just because there's a part of our erotic brains that aren't necessarily that don't really know we're married. Just like parts of our vaginas and penises don't know we're married. There's parts of our brains that do and parts of our brains that kind of don't. But I don't know that, there's people who are asexual, there's people who are aromantic, there are people who are pansexual. There's people who are homosexual who don't want to have, not every man wants to have sex with a woman at all. So I think that there's a variety of people, and so that's, everybody's different, but it is not abnormal for people to have fantasies about other people. What I would be more curious about, if this is something that's kind of coming up and causing a conversation in your marriage, is what is this about for him? Is he having fantasies? And is that causing conflict in your relationship? Is that causing tension? Is that something that's difficult for the two of you to talk about? Is that causing tension in the sense of you feeling threatened by that? We come from a culture that teaches us all to be threatened by other people, right? So the classic kind of female to female, it's like, oh, if you look at another female, that's a threat to me. And it's also amongst men, like, oh, if another man looks at my wife or something. We have a lot of territorial kind of ideas around sexuality. that don't really match the research. So most people, even though we do have fantasies about other people, we tend to be very committed to our primary partners. So there's a lot of interesting kind of, I don't know, conundrums with that kind of stuff. For example, even with erotic imagery stuff, you know, a lot of people get aroused with erotic imagery, but most people enjoy, that doesn't mean that they don't want to have sex with their spouse, right? So even though they like watching either pornography or romantic movies, they still want to have sex with their spouse. They don't want to have sex with George Clooney or the porn star, right? So they still want to go have sex with their spouse. So we're kind of wonky a little bit in our erotic brains. So I'd be wanting to know what this is about for the two of you versus trying to figure out what every man out there wants to do or doesn't want to do. Okay, I think that we are out of time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's all the questions, and we're just going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, Natasha, for doing this. Your presentation was so informative, and I honestly think you just covered so much, and it was great.
Well, thank you.
I think all of the questions have just been answered very, very thoroughly.
All right, well, thank you. It was hard to fit it all in 45 minutes, but I tried.
No, you did fantastic. So wait, I think I see one more question. Oh, everyone's just saying thank you.
Thank yous.
Yes, everyone loved it. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for participating and joining us. This recording will be available a week from today on our website at strongermarriage.org. You can follow it to a private YouTube link and watch it a week from now and send it to your friends and people who you wanted to participate with you who maybe weren't able to make it today. So thank you so much again, Natasha. You were fantastic and we're so grateful for you.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.